All right, in this video, we are going to learn about percent change. So we've already talked a bit about a decrease and how you have to subtract from 1 to figure out what that fraction change is. It works very similar when we're working with percents. You just also have to remember how to change a percent into a decimal before you do that plus or minus 1 calculation. Let's say for an example that an account is growing by 5% per year. Maybe it's some money you owe. Maybe it's a bank account that you are earning money on, 5%. And let's say that there's an initial investment of $1,000. So that means that in year 0, you would have $1,000. And most of us can probably figure out in our head that 5% of 1,000, that would be $50, right? Because 1% would be 10, and then there's 5%, so that'd be 50. So after year 1, you would have $1,050. Okay, now we have to figure out 5% of 1,050. That's a little bit harder because it's not quite as nice of a number. But if we apply what we've been learning so far in this unit, we know that we can find the multiplier by just figuring out what would you have needed to multiply in a single step to get that. So we can do 1,050 divided by 1,000 because we always divide the second number by the one before it. So if we do that, we don't even need really a calculator for that. Dividing by 1,000, right? We're going to move the decimal twice, 3 times. That'd be 1.05. So if we multiply 1,050 by 1.05, we get 1,102.50. And that should feel reasonable, right? It's a little bit more than adding on an extra $50 because we're taking that extra 5% of the 50 as well as the 5% on the 1,000. And this number should also make sense, this 1.05, because if you think about it, we're keeping all the money we already have in the account, right? That's the one part. And then we want an extra 5%. So it's the 1.05. So our multiplier here is 1.05. The 1 is because we keep the original. And that 5 is because 0.05 is the same as 5%. Okay, let's try a different example. So let's say that a car loses 17% of its value each year. What would the multiplier be? Well, 17%, that's the same as 0.17. And if we're losing value, then we need to subtract from the 1 instead of adding to the 1. So we're going to do 1 minus 0.17, which gives us 0.83 as our multiplier. If you were adding 12.5% each year, to change that into a decimal, you would do 1 plus 0.125 to get a multiplier of 1.125. All right, to change something from a percent to a decimal, you just move that decimal place twice because percent is out of 100, and that 100 is like a 2 decimal place difference. Okay, so these are just 2 different examples here, unrelated to each other. All right. Another topic that I want to throw in here because it's a little bit tricky is how to find the multiplier if you have not been given sequential values. So if you've been given a 0 and a 1, you just divide the 2, problem solved. However, if I only gave you the 0 and the 2 and I didn't give you that in between, it's still possible. It's just a little bit trickier. So let's do one like that. All right, so let's say that I told you that the starting value is 50, and then I jumped straight to 3, and I did not give you any of those in-between values. And I told you that when it reaches 3, it is 66.55. This is problematic. However, we do know that however, I told you that it's exponential, right? You can't do this unless you know for sure that it's exponential, but I've told you it's exponential. So that means that I must be able to multiply by something and then multiply by the same something and then multiply by that same thing again and end up at 66.55. All right. So let's write out an equation of what I just said. So I said that I take a 50, that starting value, I multiply it by x, multiply it by the same thing again and again, 3 times total because I jumped from 0 to 3. And then at the end, it equals 66.55. Well, let's simplify that a little bit. 50 times x to the third equals 66.55. That actually looks like something we know how to solve. I can divide by 50 on both sides. And when I do that, 66.55 divided by 50, I get 1.331. So it looks like there was a 33.1% increase from 50 to 66.5, going all the way. But I want like the multiplier. I want what I did each time. Well, since this is x to the third, I can undo cubing something by doing a cube root. So I can take the cube root of both numbers. And when I do that, so I'm going to have to, this time I will have to kind of type that number in again. So I'm going to do, cube root is the little x root right there. So I'm going to do second, because that gives me the purple options up above. And then there it is. However, answer, it says right there. I want to already have a 3 in so that it knows to do the third root. So I'm going to do 3 and then second, and then that little symbol there, and then 1.331. When I do that, it tells me that x equals 1.1. So that was my multiplier. And I could check my work, right? I could go back and I could do 50 times 1.1 times 1.1 times 1.1, and it would give me 66.55. This means I had a 10% increase. Okay, so the thing that I typed in to get that was to find the cube root of 1.331 was you type in the amount of the root that you want, so like 3, and then you do the second button, and then the one that looks like, it's called a caret symbol, the one that looks like a little triangle-y thing, and then the number that you want to go in underneath. And that would give you the third root of 1.331. All right, practice problem. What is the multiplier if an account is growing by 3.5% per year? Good luck.